Hi, Don. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. Before we start, I just want to do a quick introduction of who I am, and then I'm going to ask you to do the same. I am a trainer for Big Data Trunk, and we've been doing some interviews with L&D people around the country because there's so many changes coming. The pandemic triggered a lot of them, but there's just a lot of research and new things happening in training. So we wanted to give people a chance to talk about it and learn from each other. This would be our opportunity to do that, and we'll post these on our websites. And I thank you so much for being willing to talk with us today. So to
Oh, it's
start
my
off,
pleasure.
okay, to start off, can you tell us a little bit about you and your company? Just maybe how you got started and what your company looks like that you're working at now.
Sure, absolutely. My name is Don Becker, and I am a learning and development specialist with American National Insurance Company. I've been with this company for 3.5 years now. I'm part of a team of two other learning and development specialists. Oh, and then we have two coordinators, and then we've got our director that leads our team. We have a relatively small team, and our job is we focus on the learning and development for corporate wide learning. We also
Mhm.
focus on leadership development as well as individual contributor development. We have a company of about 4,000 people. That's not including agents, so we've got 4,000 full-time employees. And so, for a team that's relatively small, we do manage and we're able to very successfully develop and create content for company wide for our employees. Before I started with American National, I actually owned my own instructional design business.
Mm.
Going a little bit farther before that, I was, and during that I was also an adjunct professor at a couple of local universities. Before that, I was an eighth grade science teacher for a number of years.
Trial by
And
fire, huh?
oh yeah, and if we're traveling super far back into the Wayback Machine, I actually started my career as a pharmacy technician, then a district trainer with Eckerd Drugs. R.I.P. Big Blue. So I've been involved in learning development one way or another my entire adult life, and it's something that is a huge passion for me. I got my master's degree in instructional design. I got my bachelor's in psychology. So I've been involved in how people learn, why people learn, and how to make learning more interesting my entire adult life.
Oh, great. I look forward to asking you more questions then because it's also a passion of mine. I do teach myself, and the most frustrating day for me would be when I teach something and I feel like I haven't gotten an engagement. It didn't get through. So yes,
Oh,
it's
sure.
challenging. So Don, you talked about you have a group that you work with, you have a department, and you talked about doing development training. Are you also doing tech training for the companies? So, for example, if they buy a new system, are you in charge of technical training as well as kind of personal growth? What's the scope of your mission?
So that's a good question. We really don't involve ourselves in technical training because that's really more, since we're not directly involved with that, that it actually falls with more of our IT department. They
Okay.
bring us in for consulting, and if it's something that is skill development company wide, then we are definitely brought in to assist with that. I've been involved in a number of different projects with the organization about, ranging from our employee benefits to a new accounting, actuarial software that's involved. I've
Mhm.
been brought in as a consultant or to actually design products for other partners within our organization.
Okay.
But generally, we don't. If it's we've bought a new thing, that whoever's the owner of that new thing is usually who teaches it. Unless it has to
Okay.
go something company wide, then we provide our consultation. We
Okay.
really mainly focus on soft skill development
Okay.
for what we do.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then can you give me a sense also of, you've got a kind of a very distributed company, employees all over the United States, all over the world, did
Yes.
you say, or just the United
All over the
States?
United States, yes.
Okay, all
We
right.
are working on the next step, but right now it's just United States.
And so you have a team, and can you give me a sense of what is the mission of your team? If you were to say, I've got this team, I'm L&D team, what would be your mission and goals at the end of the year? How do you know you've been successful in what you tried to do?
Oh, that's a great question. So, our mission is really to provide the most quality and detailed content that is going to engage learners and to make out and to develop those capacities to help our organization grow and to be leaders in our field. That we swing for the fences with what we do. We have a very very high level of a high level of expectations for the quality of work that we produce,
Hmm.
and we meet that high quality on 99.999% of everything that we do. And so, we know that we've been successful because we get more and more every year. We get more and more demands for our involvement, either directly in designing content, in more consultations, more. We're definitely getting much more involved in more and more different facets of our organization, and so it's that demand definitely tells us that whatever we're doing is working.
Okay, and then if we take this down a notch, so that's sort of the company wide, and it sounds like you've become a resource for the company in a sense of the person who really has the skills to to bring to other departments if they need it.
Yes.
But what about individual classes? Like, how do you if you're giving classes or bringing training to the company in whatever fashion that is, how do you measure the success of that particular training or that particular class? What's your
Oh,
process for that?
sure. So the way that we actually take quantitative and qualitative data in regards to that. So we've got a pretest that judges the knowledge about what a learner may or may not know about the topic before we get into it. Then the way that we do our leadership development content is actually we deliver it in a hybrid format.
Mm,
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But they do a pretest, then they do their web-based training, then they have their skill practice, and then we do follow up with a post test to see how much of that content that they retain.
mm,
So we do definitely pre-post test, and then within that post test we also get qualitative feedback on how we as a facilitators are doing, how the content is helping them prepare themselves to be able to actually do this when they go out into the practice of leadership. Further on, that we know that we've been successful is we also have company-wide pulse surveys that determine
mm,
how our employees think about their leaders, think about the organization, and things like that. And then you can begin to see trends in data and how they collaborate or how they correspond with who's taken what course and who's how far that group of leaders has progressed throughout the curriculum.
Oh, interesting. And then do you have also, are there other challenges that you have? We'll get into some of the challenges I know that kind of came to a head with the pandemic. But are there other challenges like marketing? Do you have challenges getting information out about your classes? Do you have any challenges in just letting people know what's available?
We've That's a great question. In terms of challenges for how the course that we have available, I'm going to say yes and no. And because there's some things that it's very evident what we have available,
Hmm.
because it's those leadership development courses. So we have 12 of them, and they are very, very popular, and so they're constantly being accessed. So
Okay.
really, there's really no need for a lot of marketing about that. In the last 2 years, especially since the pandemic, we've initiated other sets of content. We've created the set of we call them they're micro trainings, little
Mm,
5 to 7 minute self-paced micro trainings that they can take. That we actively chose. It's not gonna be mandatory. We're not gonna we'll just put it out there and see what kind of organic growth that we can get from that.
interesting.
And some of the courses get a lot of organic growth, and then some of them not quite so much. And so what we've been doing is inside of our main leadership courses, we begin to kind of cross promote a little bit. And
Hmm.
so, this micro training supports this course that you just took. So if you want to know a little bit more about this topic, go take this one. You can take it on your own anytime you like.
Hmm.
We found that cross promotion has helped with the awareness of those things. Um, just this past year, we've begun promoting individual contributor courses to
Mm.
help build future leaders.
Oh,
And so that has come with a marketing campaign as well, to make them aware. The content isn't mandatory for people to take. It's hey, these things are available for you. I think if you're interested in a leadership type of path, these would be good things for you to take. So, uh,
right.
so like I said, so it's a yes and no bag. Some things it's been a little bit harder. We've had to be a little bit more aggressive with the marketing with those micro trainings, but the larger courses, there seems to be a lot of demand for it, and so it's not much as a need to market them as well as we do.
Right. And it sounds like from your company's perspective, you've got kind of a centralized, corporate body that if you want information to get out to all employees, there's already a way to do that, right? Through
Yeah, we've got our HR communications team that we
yeah.
work very closely with them, and they get the message out to our
Okay.
leaders and to the rest of the organization.
Okay.
Um, We have a lot of corporate support for our initiatives, and that's taken a long time. I know for a long time. I mean, I think most organizations, most larger organizations, can say that. The first thing that gets cut during tough times is L&D, is learning and
Mm-hmm,
development,
mm-hmm,
and because it's just you're a nice to have, not a need to have.
mm-hmm.
And thankfully, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, our organization has evolved in that thought. It's like L&D is not a nice to have; it's a need to have, because we need to continue to grow. So
That's great. You've got that support. It's really
yes,
good.
it's great. It's
Um,
it's all part of our our corporate, how the corporation manages or measures its success.
mhm.
L&D has a big part in that. So
Excellent.
the leadership attending our leadership development courses is part of that scorecard. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I think I might have noticed that on the website, the company website, where they have kind of the company who we are as a company. I think that might have fed into that.
Yeah,
It's you're lucky. You're lucky.
very lucky. I know I'm very blessed for where I work with. That's for sure. It is a
Hmm.
fantastic organization. So.
So I was going to ask you about the challenges and opportunities with that resulted from the pandemic, or just what you're seeing in the future. But maybe I'm going to shift a bit to talk about the different ways that you bring training to your customers, to your employees. So I know there's in-house trainers, there's companies you might contract with, there's purchase training like LinkedIn and lynda.com. What are
Mhm.
all the ways that you try to bring training to the people that you're in charge of training?
Sure. So as an organization, we have a couple different groups that do role-specific training, and we try, because we have such talented people with who we work with, is for the most part we actually build a lot of things in-house.
Mm,
Um, and so we've got a group in our property and claims department. It's a training group that they build a lot of their internal trainings that go to their agents. For us, in we're corporate learning developments, and so our learning is developed specifically with the mindset of this is going to the entire organization.
right.
And so we have it's just a lot of intricate work that we go into that, and so we do a lot of in-house building, but we do offer LinkedIn learning for all of our users as well. That's
Mm,
something that we work to build. We've built a lot of awareness to the availability that LinkedIn Learning has for our organization as well. So it's 99% in-house builds, and then we also have LinkedIn Learning. We very rarely purchase anything for any kind of external vendors.
okay.
For our
Okay.
corporate compliance, we have, I believe, just two things, and even those contracts are up in the next year or two, and those are probably going to be transitioned over to us designing them. Because
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
You said your team builds the training. Do you also deliver the training? So you have is your team in charge of delivering the training modules to staff?
So the trainings that we design are self-paced for a
Okay.
majority of them. The leadership development content, the specifically ones that we build for that, those are, as I mentioned earlier, those are hybrid, and so then yes, we do facilitate those as well.
Okay. 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 That's great that you've got self-learning modules. That's really a great way to do it. So let's talk about the challenges. I know that with a lot of companies, the pandemic brought things to a head. Probably changes that were going to happen anyway. So can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you're feeling now, and maybe those that came with the pandemic, or just those that you're seeing now, irrespective of the pandemic?
So I always say this, and this is something that I love. As I mentioned earlier, I really really love the company that I work with. But the best thing about American National is also sometimes the worst thing about working at American National, and that is we have a lot of employee retention. So people tend to stay. They like where they are, and so they
Hmm.
tend to stay. And so, uh, especially that, and the longer you stay, then promotions, and you have leaders like that, leaders that have been with the organization for 10, 15, 20 years.
Mm,
And so the mindset of trainings, things have to be done face to face, and that's the only way that things can be done,
mm,
was very embedded in the culture and the mindset of leadership at American National. I think that that's probably very very similar for many organizations
yes.
around the world. And then when COVID hit, I remember I was actually I live in Houston, Texas, and one of our regional locations is in Springfield, Missouri. And in March of 2020, I was in Springfield, Missouri, delivering face-to-face trainings because that's what we had to do. I did, we would fly up to we had facilitators here in Houston and in Albany, and then we would kind of split who would go to Springfield. Uh, and so I flew up to Springfield to teach a week of classes. And during that entire week, I started hearing more and more about this weird thing about this virus. It was in China, and then it wasn't, and then it's going elsewhere. And then the first reported case was now in the United States. And when I left Friday afternoon, normally I leave and it's a full airplane, and the plane was half full, and I'm like, this is really weird. But okay, thanks. I got a whole row to myself. I go into work, back in the office that next Monday, and by 11 o'clock, we get an announcement says the entire building is going to be closed. Take everything that you need because no one is going to be allowed in this building for the next 2 weeks. And
that was optimistic, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was very optimistic, right? And I can probably count on one hand the number of times I've actually worked in the office since then. And that's 2.5 years since then.
So huge effect on your train. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
So no, you're right. So it had a gigantic effect because we could no longer provide that face-to-face training because we're just not allowed to be face-to-face. And so we met as a team and we talked about it. It's like all of our classes had to get canceled for the whole month of March and April. And so we're like, what do we do? How do we, because 50 to 60% of what we do for the organization is this. What do we do now? And thankfully with me, I had a lot of experience with hybrid learning. I did a lot of hybrid learning when I taught in K-12. I was a big advocate. Like I said, I taught science, and science you got to do stuff with your hands. Not that was really aggressive on the camera. Sorry about that. But you got to do a lot of stuff with your hands. And so I only got 45 minutes in class, and the time to talk and do the lecture portion, it was just unreasonable. We had 15, 20 minutes for a lab. And so I felt like I was cheating the students. And so then I would have their homework would be read, get your lab journal ready, because when that bell rings, we're starting lab right away. And so I've been very adept with hybrid learning. And then I continued that same principles when I started teaching at the university level. And so when the time came to have that discussion, that was, I thankfully they listened and they thought that I had a good idea and I had a good setup. So I said, this is how we should deliver this training. We need to deliver it hybrid, have a self-paced part, and then we can just focus on like the skill practice as a webinar portion. And so then in 1 month, I built 5 web-based training courses in just a hair over a month. That was a lot. That was an intense amount of work. I don't believe I had ever worked as hard or as long or as quick as I ever had in my life. And so then by June 1st, we were delivering hybrid learning content.
I'm going to stop you for a second, because when I use hybrid, I think I'm using it in a different way. It sounds like when you talk about hybrid, you're talking about a combination of self-paced and then online, in person, because I think you're using it in a different way than I'm used to.
Sure, and I think traditionally we think of hybrid as sometimes face-to-face and sometimes online. And
well, let me stop you for a second. When I think of hybrid, I think of one class, and some people are present and some people are remote. That was my version of hybrid. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about yours. Yeah.
Oh, sure, of course, and I think that's another way that people can think about hybrid learning, but I think of that as like a subset of hybrid learning. And when I really think of hybrid learning, I think of content delivered in multiple modalities. And so how is that multiple modality happening? Is it a video and then an interactive game? Is it something? I think of hybrid a little bit more of a macroscopic view of multiple modalities to deliver that content. And so
that makes sense. Yeah.
And so the way we did it, we had a self-paced course, then with a webinar skill practice. That was the way that we defined our 2 modalities for delivering the content.
So, and is everything you do now hybrid? Can talk a little bit about now what that looks like in your company, that
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, so it's everything that we now deliver. All of our hybrid, all of our leadership development content is all hybrid now. We have two courses that are only web-based training because there was really no value in doing a skill practice with them, and
Hmm.
that was a really in-depth discussion as well. We actually had to go take a deep dive into each one of our courses that we offered, and it's like, where's the value that someone needs to practice?
Mm.
And because the whole idea of having a skill practice is you're going to be practicing a skill, and so what information can be pulled out and be
Got
done
it.
in a simulated scenario, in an interactive hotspot, in a video, and whatever else we need to do for the web-based training. But what are some things that we need to, as a facilitator, facilitate that learning?
Okay.
And
That
so
makes sense. Yeah.
so we really had to really get a deep dive, and there's some really great conversations within our team about how we would, what needed to go where. And two of the courses, as we began to discuss it, were it really was there's really learners can get everything they need just from this web-based training. There's really
Mm.
nothing that we would need to facilitate to help them get a greater understanding in this. It's really, not to say that we weren't important, but we can deliver this content in these certain ways that they're really going to be able to get it and understand it. And so there was some really great discussions that happened. Lots of intense building that needed to be built, and there were some bumps in the road at the beginning. Of course, people were our leaders were hesitant.
Hmm. Hmm.
It did take some convincing of our leadership. We're like, look, we don't know when we're going to be face to face ever again. We don't know when this is going to happen. But our leaders, they're at home. They still need to be able to continue to grow and be the best leaders that they can be. And so this is how we can deliver that product to them.
Hmm.
And so it was a matter of selling it to our leaders. And, thankfully for them, they were like, all right, let's try it out.
You
So
know that one of the things that people were challenged with in your area is that when you start doing this sort of hybrid learning and everybody's at home, all of a sudden the things that were easy to do in a classroom are much more difficult. So
yes.
you hand out maybe printed material, you set up things on somebody's computer for the class. You can do all that when you control the classroom, but when you don't. So do you have any challenges in that area where you've got to deal with all the different kinds of configurations that people have at home when you're trying to teach a class?
Yeah, that was one of the biggest challenges that we had was how do we deliver the resources to our learners?
Hmm.
And originally we had it built where they could download, where they would have to download it from our learning management system. But we found relatively quickly on that they would download one of the materials and not four of them.
Hmm. Hmm.
Things were getting misplaced and lost, and that caused a challenge because they needed to have their course journal completed when they went into the skill practice. And so we made a little pivot within that. And so then it was we now embedded that downloadable content. We took it out of the LMS and built it into the courses that we were developing.
Hmm.
So that
Hmm.
way, and then they had to download that stuff before they could progress.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
and so then we had considerably less of that. Oh, I didn't download it. Oh, I lost it. And things like that. But we started to see some of the additional resources, the supplemental resources. Some of those were getting misplaced. Like the journals, they had the journals, but the other stuff, job aids and things like that, were getting lost. And so
Hmm.
then we did an additional pivot later on. Was we just put everything into one big PDF, so there wasn't multiple PDFs for someone to download. Download one PDF. It's at the beginning. You can't go any further in the course until you download. It's learning objectives. Then it's here's a journal. You need to download it, and if you don't download it, you can't go any further.
Interesting.
And so that has helped a lot with that misplacement. And I
Hmm.
think it also one of the other big challenges was our learners, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of people that very kind of set in their ways is like this is the way things we've always done things, and to move away from writing things down on a piece of paper to
Mm.
typing inside of a PDF, editable PDF. That was a transition for our leaders as well, and so we had to have a lot of patience
Hmm.
with them, and guidance, and providing those guidance for the people. It's like, okay, so this is how you do it. You click in here and do, and some people that they just weren't familiar with how to edit inside of a PDF.
Well, that's interesting. And I saw the same thing early on because I volunteer for some organizations and just teaching people how to use Zoom and how to unmute themselves and how to set a background. There was a lot of technical training that had to happen before you could progress into the online training. So it
Oh,
sounds like
sure.
you had this, yeah, same
Yeah.
challenges.
Yeah. And our coordinators were absolutely fantastic with helping to build that infrastructure because they took a lot of those basic procedural questions and provided support for our leaders. With the way we deliver our webinars is it's a facilitator with a producer, and so the producer is the gets all those technical questions so that way me as a facilitator I can facilitate the course. I can go through everything that we need to go through and I can leave it that way, and our producer provides that support on the background. They are invaluable. There's no way that we'd be successful if we didn't have a facilitator producer setup.
That's an excellent way to do it. Yeah, because it's very challenging when you're trying to do it yourself.
Yeah,
Very
because then you have to
challenging.
stop talking and you're like, okay, let me answer your question, let me problem solve, and if it doesn't work the first time, then you're 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes of dead air, and everyone else is like, okay, well, I'm gonna go get a coffee, and then you've
Yeah,
lost them. So,
yeah, they disengaged. It sounds like this also gave you the opportunity, it sounds like, to go really deep dive into all the training that you offer in a way that you might not have had to do. You wouldn't have had to do it. And
oh
so
yeah,
it sounds like you've
definitely.
benefited from that as well, kind of working your way through all the things that you offer and asking, how best to deliver it, or should we even be delivering it? So it sounds like you did a lot of pruning and paring of your,
Yes, very much so. Because there was a lot of content that as we taught it face to face, it was fluff. It was the basic stuff that you would normally do in a face to face course. It's unnecessary as we began to drill down and say, what do they actually need? And
yeah.
so, some activities that were like, oh, there's a lot of value in this. How can we translate this so someone can do it self-paced on their own? And
Hmm.
so it was really for me as a lifelong learner. I really, like I said, I come from academia. I'm always a
Hmm.
lifelong learner. That's how I'm always going to classify myself. To understand content at a depth that I never would have imagined just knowing it pre-pandemic, I thought was just out. It was just really great for my growth in understanding what we're delivering, how we deliver it, understanding the learning theories behind we're doing it. And I
Hmm.
was, to be able to really go into my depths, as I mentioned earlier, my master's is in instructional design, but it's a specialization with game theory and design. And so
Hmm.
being able
Hmm.
to design those web-based trainings that we have to implement those gamification type of techniques into that while getting that concept at a greater depth, it was exciting for me. I was just, as I said, it was a lot of hard work, but just it filled me with so much excitement and so much passion that I was looking forward every day. It's like, what can I do now? It's like, oh, I think I can do this. I can, and so yeah,
Do we need another
it's been
pandemic to interest you in? But let's talk a little bit. You mentioned gamification, and that's a term I see thrown around a lot. And that's part of the new research that's coming out, isn't it, on how people learn? Can you talk a little bit about that when you say you've implemented some gamification in your training? What does that look like?
Oh, sure, absolutely. So I think one of the things that when you look at gamification, it tends to be, oh, it's points and badges and leaderboards. And that's really not what gamification is. That's a way that you can it's an external way that you can show progress in whatever they're doing with gamification, and that is a piece of it. But I think the big overarching way that we look at gamification is what makes games interesting, what makes games fun, what makes games engaging, and how can we translate those skills to help people learn in the same engaging manner. And so it is a matter of what are some of the things that we see a lot in games. Games are colorful, games are dynamic, games have a generally, if for the most part, a basic tutorial at the very, very beginning of it. So you learn the basic navigation, so you have to try to figure that part out. Games also have a story that goes through it. I think a very underutilized aspect of gamification is the digital storytelling aspect. And so I try to integrate a lot of that in with the course that I design. It's like I'm not just you're learning A, then learning B, then learning C. We're telling a story that goes all the way through.
So give me an example of that. When you talk about digital storytelling, give me an example of how you implemented that or put that together in one of the classes.
Oh, sure. I'll give you an example for one of our courses. It's called Resolving Workplace Conflict. That's a really great example of it. And so the way that it starts off is the story starts off between a leader having to manage a conflict between two employees.
Hmm.
That's how we're starting. And throughout the course, throughout the web-based training portion, you see what has happened. Why we talk about, okay, there's a conflict. Then we discuss, well, why did this conflict happen? How did this conflict happen? How did it get worse? What happened next? And then
Mm.
we continue with the
Mm.
storyline. And then as we get farther along, then there's actually an interactive piece that's built into it where it's a choose your own adventure. So you act as one of the people that's in the conversation, and you act as the leader, and you're going to be talking to both of the people, and you have to choose which is the best response to elicit the right thought process, so those two people
Interesting.
can manage and resolve their conflict between them. So
Hmm.
it's a whole story. It starts at, with the conflict, and then at the end of that course is you've resolved that conflict that they were involved in.
That's an excellent way to put it together. And then the training is kind of painless at that point. It's they get
Yeah.
caught up more in the storytelling and the resolution than the actual. It's not so dry,
Yeah,
right?
and it's not, you're not just watching a story unfold
Hmm.
because of the interactive pieces that we have built into the course. They're involved with that resolution and how to get it resolved the right way.
Yeah.
So that just further builds that engagement with the learner, gets that really higher level of understanding of the content.
By the way, excellent class. One of the things that I do, I am retired, but one of the things that I do, I'm a volunteer conflict coach and mediator
Oh,
in the
nice.
community. And so resolving conflict in the workplace I think it would save us billions of dollars.
Oh, very
I'm,
much so. Very
I'm
much
glad
so.
you're offering that class. So let's talk a little bit about the future of L&D. So you in the past 2 years, you've experienced tremendous change. But looking forward, what do you see when you look forward about the changes that are coming potentially?
So some of the changes that I've been seeing in L&D, which I think are very, very fascinating, is a lot of the augmented and virtual reality type of
Mm,
learning. And I think that at the basic level, we're starting to do that now, but I think that there's a lot more that can be done in greater depth. There's definitely certain skill sets in different areas that could really benefit from a lot of this augmented or virtual reality type of learning. Specifically things that people that need that in-depth skill practice. How much time do we spend in training people that are working in a factory that builds automobiles? How much time is spent on nurses and and lab X-ray techs to learn how to operate their machinery, how to do intubations and things like that? Things that they work on practice dummies. Well, what can be done with a VR headset and being able to mimic those things over and over again?
mm,
You know, they could they could do that at home. They could do that, elsewhere. There's a lot of different places that they could apply that type of learning. So I think those that types of learning, I find that to be very, very exciting. In terms of where we are in the insurance space, we look at what are some of the innovative ideas that can help us to improve our customers, and what how can we provide that support and that learning, because where we are in L&D, I'm very far away from the person that buys the insurance,
right.
but it's a chain, right? And each link in that chain goes to where it needs to be, which will eventually lead to the customer. So what can we do to make sure that that chain is as strong as it possibly can be? And so
Mm,
we're always looking for new ways to build that capacity, for our people that are down that chain.
right.
And I think one of the things that I find is with a lot of potential, uh, in that, is the digital storytelling aspect. I think is very, very fascinating. I think it's something that we don't utilize enough. I'm a big advocate for that. I think that that's definitely something that I see a lot more of. That I also see a lot more of, just, I'm trying to word it right. Sorry, I apologize. I want
That's
to
all
get the
right.
right wording of. I think that really that immersive learning is going to be
Mm,
something that is going to be even more important for, uh, for as we continue to grow as a learning development space, not outside of the direct skill practice, but
Hmm.
getting that soft skill development, because I think that's how you really are going to be able to really experience some of those things that maybe you can't. I think that immersive learning is going to be a very, very
And
just going to go forward with that.
Don, can you tell me what you mean? You talk about immersive learning. What are you seeing when you say that?
So when I talk about immersive learning, I think about in K-12 it's similar to what we talk about with personalized learning, right? So I want to learn the best way that I can for me. I may not be
Mm,
someone who likes to read a book, but I like to watch a YouTube video on how to do something, and I can get it that way.
okay,
you know
okay.
and so when I think of immersive learning, it's like, okay, how can I find these things that are going to help me understand not just this small sliver of something that somebody is telling me, but I can understand the whole picture, the
Right,
whole circle. And
right.
it is a combination of, I'm going to take, I take a self-paced course, and then I'm also going to watch a video, and then I
Got
can
it.
do a VR skill practice.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it's that personalized learning to get as deep as I want to get on this topic, and so I understand really the 360, the full picture, instead of just a small sliver of it.
Interesting. So you're kind of putting the learner in the center, and this and the technique
Mhm.
around the learner, and that's
Exactly.
kind of, yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I did want to talk a little bit about your path. You have a very interesting path to your corporate job. What would you say to people starting out who wanted a job, let's say your job? What do you think is the best path for them in terms of education or training, or just what would you want to tell them, people that are starting out?
So for the people that are starting out, I definitely would suggest is find your passion.
Mm,
What is it that you want? What is it that you enjoy doing? And then from there, what drives you to continue to pursue whatever that is that you like?
mm,
For me, I remember, it was as I was going through life. I was a district trainer at Eckerd Drugs. I liked doing what I was doing, but it was very simply, I hit a glass ceiling, because without a degree, without going any further, then I knew that I was kind of stuck where I was. And for a while there, I was okay with that.
mm-hmm.
You know, I was doing something that I was passionate about, that I enjoyed doing, but then there's this weird, like, little voice in the back of my head that was like, be better, do better.
Mm,
And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? And it was drive. It was telling me that I needed to be better and to do better. So then I went back to school, and I got my degree, and then it was like, okay, well, what's next? It's like, continue to do better, continue to be better. I
mm-hmm.
knew that I loved learning, I loved development, I loved teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so I continued to pursue that in as many different avenues as I could. I enjoyed the corporate learning, in the pharmacy side. I enjoyed doing that. I really, really did. And I'm like, okay, well, I think, how else can I understand learning better? And so then that's when I moved into K-12 in academia. And I got learning from that perspective as well. And so I felt like I was understanding a lot of different learning theories and how they were getting applied in
Mm,
in different ways. I'm going from teaching adults to teaching kids, andragogy to pedagogy, and those types of things. And really understanding that at a greater depth it was fun for me. It was exciting. And then moving into higher ed and taking that even to a greater depth of level, and just understanding why people learn, how people learn, just that voice inside me, that drive going, do better, be better. And that's what I continue to do and continue to pursue. And so for anyone that's out there that's interested in going into learning development, um, learning is passion, learning is excitement, learning is drive to constantly want to do better and to be better. And so the best advice I could give anyone out there that wants to be in this field, in this position, is to learn, is to grow, and to really try to expose yourself to as many different kinds of learning environments until you find the one that fits you, and
mm.
then see how you can grow from there. How can you can continue to do better and be better?
I love that. I love that, Don. That be better, do better. I'm gonna. That's that sounds like a slogan for life. All right. I have to tell you, I've really enjoyed talking to you, Don. You have such passion around learning and helping other people learn. Really, the passion is around seeing that learning land with other people well. Is there anything
Thank you.
that you'd like to say? Is there anything I failed to ask you? Something that you'd like people to take away? Or have we covered it?
Wow, we've covered quite a bit in our time together, but I think probably my one big message, I guess that we could, I guess we could probably wrap it up with, is learning doesn't have to be boring, doesn't have to be just how do you get from point A to point B in a straight line?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a choose your own adventure book.
Mm.
And so make it fun, make it learning, and make it exciting and engaging, because learning can be fun. Learning is excitement. Learning is awesome. You are getting better at something that you weren't good at beforehand. And so that's the goal, I think.
Be better, do better.
You better do better.
All right, Don, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time. This has been great fun to talk to you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it.
Sure. Mm.